spot in the flat's little study, River could see the doctor nestled amidst a small cloud of pillows on the sofa, gazing stonily at a book gripped tightly in his hands. Something seemed to be bothering him. She'd been watching him for over 5 minutes now, and he hadn't turned a single page. River had noticed that the doctor had become more and more moody over the past few weeks, an occasional hint of what seemed to be sadness-tinged fearfulness sparking in his eyes with increasing frequency. She knew why. By her count, they were well into their 23rd year on Darillium. They had, of course, promised that they wouldn't actively keep track of the time that passed, but they just somehow seemed to know. She watched him now, staring at his book. He had never been good at saying goodbye. River slung the satchel over her shoulder and put on her biggest smile, and stepped out into the hall. "It's going to be absolutely brilliant," she fished out her vortex manipulator from the satchel. "A library the size of a planet containing every book that's ever been written. Fancy that." He offered her a piece of French toast on a TARDIS blue porcelain plate, which she took while he took the vortex manipulator from her grip. She held her wrist out, and he began to fasten the device to it. River watched him do this, chewing thoughtfully. "Have you ever been there?" she inquired, adding, "This toast is delicious, by the way." He shook his head. "No, but it sounds lovely. I can't wait to hear all about it." She eyed him, frowning slightly. What was up with him? There was definitely something bothering him. He flashed her one of his smiles, and she felt a lump of worry melt away. Perhaps it was just her nearing her expiration date, she thought. She ran a hand through his voluminous grey hair. "Oh, cheer up, sweetie," she hummed melodically, twirling a lock of his hair with her finger. "It's just a few days. There and back." She glanced at her vortex manipulator. "Perhaps a quick detour on the way, though. We can have dinner at that place you like." He didn't quite hear her words, watching as she babbled on, checking her sonic and various tools. Occasionally, she flashed him little grins, and he nodded along, returning her smiles with his own, hoping desperately that they didn't betray the sorrow coursing through his chest. "Are you okay?" she inquired, her face dipping into a slight frown. He blinked. "Of course I am." She didn't quite believe him, but ploughed on nonetheless. The doctor raised an eyebrow. Archaeology. She was saying something about archaeology and a contract that she had refused to sign. "Perhaps we could take a trip there when I get back," said River, after a quick moment of thought. "I know how much you love books." "Yes," he said. "It's a date." Her face lit up at this. And he revelled in this. His River. His happy River. If he could choose a way to remember her, this would be it. "Absolutely." She did another quick check of her possessions and headed for the door, tapping something into her vortex manipulator. It had been her idea to use the front door when she went on trips. It made them feel strangely normal. Well, as normal as a Time Lord and his wife could get, anyway. He watched her go, unable to shake the thought that every step she took towards that door was a step out of his life. "I'm sorry." The words flipped briefly through his mind. He wished he could tell her what was about to happen to her. Perhaps she would stay, but it wouldn't be the same. Their time would be tainted, and he didn't want to remember her like that. Besides, they'd had 24 years. That would have to be enough. "Hey," River said, the door resting on her shoulder. He snapped to attention. Her voice had softened, and she smiled gently at him. In that instant, the light seemed to catch her at just the right angle, casting an almost ethereal warm glow around her person. She hesitated. "I love you." The breath caught in his throat. River nodded. He wouldn't say it back. Of course, she loved him all the same. He gazed at her with those soft, light eyes she found herself so frequently lost in. River cast him a smile, and she slipped out the door, hand reaching for a button on her vortex manipulator. Then she was gone. The door clicked shut, and the world seemed to stop moving. The silence, disturbed only by the soft rustling of the curtains as they shifted in the wind, seemed to crush him. It clawed at his chest, squeezing him so tightly he almost struggled to breathe, the beat of his two hearts thundering in his ears until it seemed that everything throbbed those 4 rhythmic beats. The doctor held the book in his hands, his thumb brushing lightly over the edges of its pages, eyes gazing steadfastly at the door. He took a deep, shuddering breath, wincing as a sharp pain radiated across his chest. And yet, he knew it wasn't caused by any physical malady. He could still feel her in the apartment. Hear that peal of laughter she gave when he made one of his jokes, something he had done with increasing frequency over the 24 years. See her warm eyes illuminated sparklingly by the distant suns in Darillium's system, gazing at him when he awoke every morning. He glanced towards the kitchen, and for a second, he could see her there, perched on the counter in her pyjamas, grinning at him as he cooked breakfast. He got up and made his way down the hall, peeking into one room, then the next, allowing every detail to etch itself into his memory. Of course, he could return. The apartment was theirs for another 8,040 of their years, but he had a feeling that he wouldn't return anytime soon, if ever. His hand running itself down the doorframe of the study, he scanned the shelves, looking for a particular book. About 3 minutes later, he realised that the book in question was in the process of being squeezed to a pulp in his hands. It was hardly his fault. He had been so on edge since River had announced her trip a few days ago, he hadn't been able to read, his eyes glazing over whenever he looked at the words. Seeing, but never actually reading. The Time Traveller's Wife. She had given it to him, almost as a joke. It had appeared on his nightstand one day, perched on top of his diary, full of her annotations and remarks that had crossed her mind while reading it. A one-sided conversation. Her side of the conversation. She had even inscribed it for him, a short note scribbled on the title page. So you can talk to me, even when I'm not there. She had drawn a small heart and a star next to it. He read the note again, and smiled. A small, shaky smile. He shut the door to the study, and stood, gazing desolately down the hall. What was he to do now? He had grown accustomed to his life on Darillium, to the routine they'd had going. All those times he had expressed something akin to horror when contemplating a quiet, domestic life. And here he was now, almost fearful of something that wasn't that. Who would have known? The doctor slipped into the bedroom, picking up his diary and a few pieces of clothing. He crossed the hall, pausing only to add a framed photo to the pile of belongings in his arms, and entered the laundry room, making his way to a blue wooden box tucked in the corner. The lights flickered on as he made his way into the console room, and deposited his belongings on one of the chairs that dotted the room's circumference. He flicked a switch on the console, and stopped, gazing deeply into the orange glow of the time rotors. The TARDIS gave a sympathetic, chirruping burble. "I know," he said, sighing. "I know." He pressed a button thoughtfully, his hand lingering almost wistfully over another. For a second, his eyes darted towards the TARDIS doors, as though he expected a certain someone to burst through it. "Well, off we go then," he finally said, turning his attention back to the console and its array of buttons and levers. Where would he go now? He let his mind flick for a list of places he could visit, perhaps something nice and dangerous. He would probably go mad if he stewed in his current state of mind. The TARDIS burbled sternly, a sharp warning about his potential myriad of bad choices. He reluctantly decided that she had a point. A beep from one of the monitors interrupted his thoughts. He swung the screen round towards him and, despite his current mood, let himself smile. Someone, somewhere needed help. For a split second he saw her, grinning at him from the other side of the console. It was all he needed. Determined, he slammed a lever down, reinvigorated with the knowledge that even though that particular chapter of his life had closed, it wouldn't be for naught. She had changed him, and he knew no matter what happened, no matter how many regenerations he would go through, he would carry her memory with him, and she would never truly be gone.